Margaret had worked the Highway 49 toll booth for 6 months before training me for the night shift. She pointed to scratch marks on the inside of the booth's door, dozens of sets of 5 parallel lines, like someone had been counting days with their fingernails. "Every attendant adds their marks," she said. "1 scratch for each night you see them pass through, the vehicles that shouldn't exist. I've got 127 marks. The record is 216 before James quit. Nobody's made it past 250 feet. She handed me the register and a set of keys, then pointed to fresh scratches below hers. "Those 12 are from the attendant before you, Carol. She lasted 2 weeks before she drove her car into the barrier at 90 miles per hour. Left a note saying she couldn't watch them pass through anymore, knowing where they were going and unable to stop them. That night I understood what she meant when the first convoy of military vehicles from 1969 passed through, headed for a war that ended 50 years ago. My name is David Mills, and I took the night toll booth position on Highway 49 because I needed a job that required no thinking, no decision-making, no emotional investment. After losing my daughter Emily in a car accident 6 months earlier, I wanted work that was purely mechanical. Take money, make change, raise the gate. The isolation of a toll booth at night seemed perfect for someone who couldn't handle human interaction anymore. Highway 49 was a remote mountain pass 40 miles outside of Denver, connecting the city to the ski resorts, but seeing little traffic after dark. The pay was exceptional for such simple work, $65 an hour for the night shift, triple what day workers made. I should have questioned why the pay was so high. I should have wondered why the turnover rate meant they were constantly hiring. But grief makes you stupid, and I just wanted a place where I could sit alone with my pain and get paid for it. Margaret met me at 9 p.m. on a cold Thursday in October. She was probably 55, with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of 1,000-yard stare I recognized from my own mirror. Her hands shook constantly, not from age, but from something else. Something that made her check the highway behind us every few seconds, as if expecting something to arrive. "The booth operates 24/7, she explained, leading me to the small structure that sat in the middle of 8 lanes of highway. Days are busy with ski traffic and commuters. Nights are dead quiet, usually just truckers and the occasional drunk trying to get home. Your shift runs 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The toll booth was cramped, but functional. A chair, a register, a computer system for electronic passes, a small heater, and windows on all sides, giving a clear view of approaching traffic. The walls were covered in faded safety posters and procedure charts. But what caught my attention were the scratches she'd pointed out. They covered the inside of the door from top to bottom, some fresh, some so old the wood showed through the paint. "What are these really?" I asked, running my finger along a particularly deep set. Margaret's expression tightened. "Exactly what I told you. Counting. Every attendant who's worked nights here starts counting after their first encounter. It's a way to track it, to prove to yourself you're not going crazy." She pulled out a laminated sheet from the desk drawer. Unlike the official procedures posted on the walls, this was handwritten in multiple different hands, as if each attendant had added to it over the years. "These are the real rules for the night shift," she said. "Not company policy, but survival guidelines based on decades of experience." The list read, 1. Vehicles without license plates pass free. Do not make eye contact with drivers. 2. Military convoys from past wars are exempt from tolls. Log them as training exercises. 3. School buses after midnight should not be stopped or questioned. 4. If a vehicle pays with old currency, accept it without comment. 5. Between 3 to 4 a.m., Do not leave the booth for any reason. 6. Cars with fogged windows hiding the interior should be processed quickly. 7. If you see yourself driving through, do not acknowledge it. 8. Emergency vehicles with no emergency pass without question. 9. When the radio plays music from decades past, turn it off immediately. 10. Never, ever try to warn them about where they're going. Warn who? I asked. Margaret looked at me with exhausted eyes. The dead. They pass through here every night, heading to wherever souls go. This toll booth isn't just collecting money, it's a checkpoint between worlds. The accident in 1987 that killed 200 people when the old bridge collapsed. They never really left. They just keep driving through, paying their tolls, continuing their journeys. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss this as hazing or mental illness, but something in her expression stopped me. This wasn't a joke or delusion. She believed every word. The highway was rebuilt after the collapse, she continued, but they kept this toll booth from the original road. Nobody knows why. Maybe it was cheaper than building a new one, or maybe someone understood that it needed to stay. It's a permanent fixture now, a doorway that can't be closed. She showed me the register system, the computer, the basic operations. Everything seemed normal enough during the training. Cars would approach, I'd collect tolls or scan electronic passes. The gate would rise, they'd drive through. Simple. Your first few nights might be normal, Margaret said as she prepared to leave. Sometimes they test new attendants. Wait to see if you'll last. But eventually, you'll see them. And once you do, you'll understand why we count the scratches. She paused at the door. David, I know why you took this job. I looked up the news articles. I'm sorry about your daughter. I stiffened, not wanting to discuss Emily. The thing is, Margaret continued, grief makes us vulnerable to them. They're drawn to loss, to guilt, to unfinished business. Just be careful. Don't let them use your pain against you. She left before I could ask what she meant. My first 3 nights were completely uneventful. A few trucks, some late-night travelers, a couple of drunk college kids heading back from Denver. I collected tolls, made change, raised the gate. The isolation was exactly what I'd wanted. Hours of silence to sit with my thoughts. No forced conversations, no sympathetic looks from people who'd heard about the accident. I spent those quiet hours thinking about Emily. She'd been 17, just starting to look at colleges, full of life and plans and dreams. The accident had been so mundane. A drunk driver ran a red light, hit her car on the driver's side. She died instantly, they said. No suffering, but I suffered enough for both of us, replaying every moment, wondering if I'd said goodbye properly that morning, if I'd told her I loved her, if I'd been a good enough father. On the 4th night, October 28th, everything changed. It started at 11:47 p.m. with a 1969 military convoy. I heard them before I saw them. The deep rumble of diesel engines, the clink of metal on metal. Then they emerged from the darkness, a line of olive green trucks with canvas covers, jeeps with mounted guns, transport vehicles full of soldiers, Vietnam-era vehicles in perfect formation, heading west toward the mountains. I stood up to get a better look. The vehicles were pristine but somehow wrong. They moved in complete silence despite the engine sounds, and no dust or exhaust came from them. As the lead jeep approached my booth, I saw the driver clearly in my booth light. He was young, maybe 19, in full combat gear, but his face was gray, his eyes unfocused, and there was a dark stain spreading across his chest from a wound that hadn't healed in 50 years. He stopped at my window and handed me exact change, coins that felt ice cold and looked freshly minted from 1969. Training exercise, he said in a voice like grinding sand. Heading to deployment. I wanted to tell him the war was over, had been over for decades, but Margaret's rules echoed in my mind. Military convoys from past wars are exempt from tolls. logged them as training exercises. I took the coins, logged the passage as instructed, and raised the gate. The convoy passed through, 23 vehicles in total, each one carrying soldiers who stared straight ahead with thousand-yard stares that would never blink again. As the last truck passed, I saw into the back. Rows of young men in body bags, neatly arranged, dog tags glinting in the overhead light. The convoy disappeared into the darkness, heading toward a war that existed now only in memory and monument. I stood there shaking, the ice-cold coins in my hand already beginning to dissolve into rust. I made my first scratch on the door that night. At 12:30 a.m., a school bus arrived, yellow, weathered, with Riverside Elementary painted on the side in fading letters. It pulled up to my window, and I could hear children singing inside. The wheels on the bus, in young voices that made my chest tight with memories of Emily at that age. The driver was a middle-aged woman in a rain slicker, which was odd because it was a clear night. Her hair was wet, plastered to her head, and water dripped constantly from her clothes. She smiled at me, but her lips were blue with cold. "Field trip," she said, her voice gurgling slightly. "Taking them to the mountain lake for swimming lessons." Through the bus windows, I could see the children, 30 or so kids, all in swimsuits despite the October cold, all soaking wet, all singing in perfect unison. Water pooled in the aisle between the seats and ran out from under the door. I knew what this was. June 15th, 1992. A school bus had driven off the road during a sudden storm, plunging into Riverside Lake. 31 children and 2 adults had drowned. It had been national news, led to new safety regulations, memorial funds, decades of grief for the families. "No toll for school trips," the driver said, though I hadn't asked. "We already paid." The gate rose on its own. As the bus pulled through, I saw a little girl in the back window. She pressed her palm against the glass and mouthed a single word: "Help." But there was no help to give. They'd been beyond help for 30 years. I added another scratch to the door. At 2:47 a.m. exactly, the gray sedan arrived, a 1987 Honda Civic, unremarkable except for the fact that it was covered in dust that looked like concrete powder. The driver was a man in a business suit, but where his face should have been was just smooth skin, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, yet somehow he spoke. Exact change. He held out coins from 1987, the year the bridge had collapsed. I recognized the date because that was the year Emily had been born, the year my life had truly begun. Now both that year and my daughter were gone. I took the coins, raised the gate. As he drove through, I noticed the car's back seat was full of rubble, chunks of concrete, twisted rebar, pieces of bridge that had fallen 200 feet into the canyon below. He was carrying his own death with him, unable to leave it behind. Another scratch on the door. The incidents continued through the night. A motorcycle from 1973, the rider's head at an impossible angle. A family in a station wagon from 1981. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty exhaust. They paid while unconscious, never opening their eyes. A delivery truck from 1999. The driver cheerfully waving despite the steering column protruding through his chest. Each one passed through my toll booth, paying their fee, continuing their endless journey on a highway that led nowhere for the dead. And with each passage, I understood more clearly what Margaret had meant. We weren't just collecting tolls. We were witnessing a procession of souls stuck in the moment of their death, replaying their final journeys night after night. At 3:33 a.m., something different happened. A familiar car approached the booth. A blue Toyota Camry with a dented front bumper, and a University of Colorado sticker on the windshield. I knew that car. I'd bought it for Emily on her 16th birthday. She'd been driving it when she died. My heart stopped as the car pulled up to my window, but the driver's seat was empty. The car was driving itself, or being driven by something I couldn't see. The window rolled down, and I smelled her perfume, the vanilla body spray she always wore too much of. On the passenger seat was her backpack, the one she'd had with her that night, still covered in the band patches and buttons she'd collected. A voice came from the empty driver's seat. Not Emily's voice, but something pretending to be her. "Hi, Dad." I couldn't breathe. Every part of me wanted to reach through the window, to touch the car, to somehow connect with whatever remained of my daughter. But Margaret's warnings echoed. "Don't let them use your pain against you." "You're not her," I managed to say. "I could be," the voice replied. "I know everything she knew. I remember our trip to Disneyland when I was 7. I remember you teaching me to drive in the parking lot behind the grocery store. I remember our fight the morning I died when you said I couldn't go to the party. That last detail hit like a physical blow. We had fought that morning. I'd forbidden her from going to a party I thought would be dangerous. She'd stormed out angry, and those were our last words to each other. The guilt had been eating me alive for 6 months. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry, Emily. You could come with me," the voice said. "It's easy. Just step out of the booth and get in the car. We could drive together like we used to. Sunday drives in the mountains, remember? You always said those were your favorite times. They had been my favorite times. Just Emily and me, driving without destination, talking about everything and nothing, before she got too cool to hang out with her dad." My hand was on the door handle. It would be so easy. Step out, get in the car, drive away with whatever was left of my daughter. Even if it wasn't really her, even if it was something else wearing her memory like a mask, wouldn't that be better than this crushing loneliness? "Don't do it." A different voice from outside the booth. I turned to see Margaret standing by the highway, though she shouldn't have been there. Her shift had ended hours ago. "That's not your daughter, David. It's something that feeds on grief, on guilt. It knows her memories because those memories live in you, and it can read them. But Emily herself, she's gone on to wherever souls go when they're truly free. That thing in the car is just an echo, a parasite." The empty car revved its engine impatiently. "Choose," the Emily voice said, dropping its sweet tone. "Come with me now, or I'll come back every night. Every night, Dad. Can you handle seeing me die over and over? Can you handle the guilt?" I looked at the car, at Margaret, at my own hands gripping the door handle. Emily was gone. I'd known that for 6 months. This thing might wear her face, speak with her voice, carry her memories. But it wasn't her. It was my pain given form, my guilt made manifest. "No," I said, letting go of the handle. "My daughter is dead. You're just a shadow." The car's engine roared with anger. For a moment, I glimpsed something in the driver's seat. Not Emily, but something ancient and hungry, made of shadow and regret. Then the gate rose on its own, and the car sped through, disappearing into the darkness. Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's why most don't make it past 250 nights. Eventually, the booth shows you the one thing you can't resist. For me, it was my son who died in Afghanistan. For Carol, it was her husband who'd committed suicide. The booth knows what haunts us and uses it." "Why didn't you quit?" I asked. "Because someone has to be here," she said. "Someone has to witness their passages, to maintain the boundary between the living and the dead. If this booth ever stands empty, if there's no one here to watch them pass through, they might stop moving, They might stay, and trust me, you don't want the dead to stop their journey. She walked back to her car, which I now noticed was parked in the emergency lane. You did well tonight. Not many resist on their first encounter. But it'll try again. They always do. As she drove away, I realized I'd been making scratches on the door the entire time we'd talked. 7 scratches for 7 passages, and the night wasn't over yet. At 4 a.m., the nature of the traffic changed. These weren't individual vehicles anymore, but entire processions, parades of the dead from various eras and tragedies. A wedding party from 1995, 17 cars decorated with fading ribbons and cans that rattled silently, all of them having crashed on the way to the reception when the lead car's drunk driver veered off the mountain road. They passed through in formation, the bride and groom in the first car still in their wedding attire, both covered in glass that sparkled like diamonds in my booth light. Then came the tour bus from 2003, Rocky Mountain Adventures, painted on the side, filled with elderly tourists who'd been on a leaf-peeping tour when the driver had a heart attack. They all sat in their seats, cameras around their necks, still pointing at sights they'd never see, heading toward destinations they'd never reach. The driver slumped over the wheel, somehow still steering, paid the toll with a credit card that had expired 20 years ago. I kept making scratches on the door. 10, 15, 20. My hand was starting to cramp from gripping the keys I used to carve the wood. At 4:30 a.m., I noticed something strange on the computer system. It was generating reports I hadn't requested. Detailed logs of every vehicle that had passed through, but not just from tonight. The records went back decades. Thousands upon thousands of passages, all carefully documented with timestamps, vehicle descriptions, and payment methods. But there was a subcategory I hadn't noticed before. Incomplete journeys. I clicked on it and found a list of vehicles that passed through regularly, but were marked with red flags. The notes were disturbing. 1987 Honda Civic. Driver, Matthews, Carl. Status, cannot reach final destination. Loops at mile marker 47. School bus. 47. Driver, Patterson, Linda. Status, circles back nightly. Children remain aware. Military convoy Delta 79. Commander, Lieutenant. Morrison. Status, destination, Vietnam, no longer exists as they knew it. They weren't just passing through to some afterlife. They were stuck in loops, driving the same stretches of highway forever, unable to reach wherever they were trying to go. And at the bottom of each entry was the same note: requires living witness to maintain boundary. That's when I understood our real purpose. We weren't toll collectors. We were anchors, keeping the dead moving, preventing them from stopping, from staying, from trying to turn back. Our presence, our witnessing, somehow kept them in motion toward whatever came next, even if they couldn't quite reach it. The radio in the booth suddenly came to life, which was impossible since I'd unplugged it after Margaret's warning. Static filled the small space, then cleared to reveal a Vietnam-era broadcast. Charlie Company moving toward designated coordinates. Heavy casualties reported, requesting immediate evac. I reached for the radio to turn it off, but before I could, a different voice came through. Modern, clear, and terrifyingly familiar. Dad? Emily's voice, but not the thing pretending to be her from earlier. This sounded different, more real, more her. Dad, are you there? I'm scared. I don't know where I am. Every rational part of me knew this was another trick, another manipulation. But what if it wasn't? What if somehow, in all this supernatural chaos, my daughter really was trying to reach me? I'm in the car, Her voice continued, growing more distressed. But I can't see anything. It's dark, and I keep driving, but I never get anywhere. There are others here, Dad. So many others, all driving, all lost. I grabbed the radio handset, even though it wasn't connected to anything. Emily. Dad. Oh God, you can hear me. Please, you have to help me. I'm at mile marker. I can't read it. Everything's blurry. But I pass your booth sometimes. I see you, but you never see me. I'm invisible or something. Please, Dad. Please help me get out. My rational mind fought with my heart. This felt different from the earlier encounter. Less manipulative, more genuinely confused and frightened. What if Emily really was trapped like the others in those incomplete journeys? How do I help you? I asked the dead radio. You have to leave the booth, she said. Come to mile marker 47. That's where we loop back. That's where you can pull me out. But you have to come now, before sunrise. Once the light comes, we disappear for another day. Mile marker 47. The same marker mentioned in the computer's report about the Honda Civic that couldn't reach its destination. The place where things looped back. Margaret's rules echoed. Between 3 and 4 a.m., do not leave the booth for any reason. It was 4:45 a.m., technically past the forbidden window. Please, Dad. I don't want to spend another day in this darkness. I've been driving for 6 months, trying to get home, trying to find you. Please. I stood up, hand on the door. Every instinct screamed at me not to leave the booth. But what if? What if the time, it really was her? Could I live with myself if I left my daughter trapped in some eternal loop when I had the chance to save her? A loud bang on the booth's door made me jump. Margaret stood outside, but she looked different, older, more weathered, and her eyes were pure white. Don't you dare leave this booth, she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from beyond her. That's not your daughter. Your daughter passed through cleanly on the night she died. I saw her myself, single car, no loops, no confusion. She went straight through to whatever comes next. That thing on the radio is what killed Carol. What? It called to her, pretending to be her husband. She left the booth to help him at mile marker 47. They found her car wrapped around the barrier at 90 miles per hour, just like she described in her suicide note. But the thing is, David, she didn't write that note. It appeared after she died, in her handwriting, explaining why she couldn't watch them pass through anymore. The thing that pretends to be our loved ones. It doesn't just kill us. It makes it look like we chose it. The radio crackled again. Emily's voice, but different now, angrier. Don't listen to her, Dad. She's one of them. She's dead too. She's been dead for years. Look at her eyes. I looked at Margaret's white eyes, then at my own hands, which were starting to become translucent in the pre-dawn light. We're all dead here sometimes, Margaret said calmly. The boundary between living and dead gets thin at this booth. Some nights I'm alive, warning new attendants. Some nights I'm dead, passing through in my car. I don't always know which until I try to leave, and either can or can't. But you, David, you're still anchoring, still needed. Don't throw that away for a voice on a dead radio. The Emily voice grew desperate. Dad, please. The sun's coming. I'll be trapped for another whole day. Another darkness and driving and never getting home. Please. I looked at the clock. 5:15 a.m. Sunrise in about 30 minutes. My shift ending in 45. I'd survived the night, made it through the worst of the passages. All I had to do was stay in the booth until 6 a.m. when the day shift would arrive. But the crying on the radio was so real, so perfectly Emily when she was upset. The way her voice cracked on certain words, the way she gasped between sobs. It was either a perfect imitation or It's not her, I said out loud to myself, to Margaret, to whatever was listening. My daughter is dead. She died 6 months ago. Whatever you are, you're not her. The radio exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic, despite being unplugged. The Emily voice transformed into something inhuman, screaming in frequencies that made my teeth ache. Outside the booth, I saw them clearly for the first time. Not the dead passing through, but the things that fed on the dead, that used their memories and voices and faces to lure the living into joining the eternal procession. They looked like holes in reality, shaped vaguely like people, but made of absence rather than presence. They clustered around mile marker 47, where the loops happened, where the incomplete journeys circled back, feeding on the confusion and loss and inability to move on. That's what really haunts this place, Margaret said, and I noticed her eyes had returned to normal. Not the dead. They're just trying to pass through. It's the things that feed on the boundary, the parasites that use grief and guilt to recruit more souls for their collection. Every toll booth attendant who's died, who's given in to the voices, they don't join the normal procession. They become food for those things. How do we stop them? We don't. We just witness. We anchor. We keep the legitimate dead moving through while resisting the parasites that would trap us. That's why the scratches matter. Each mark is a night we've resisted, a night we've maintained the boundary. At 250 marks, something changes. The parasites lose interest, move on to easier prey. That's why no one's made it past 250. They either give in before then, or they survive and quit immediately after. The sun was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. The procession of dead vehicles was thinning, their passages becoming less frequent. A few stragglers, a motorcycle from 1976, a minivan from 2009, passed through as the light grew stronger. At exactly 6 a.m., my replacement arrived, a young man named Kevin, fresh out of college, eager for a job that would let him study for his graduate school exams during the quiet hours. He had no idea what he was walking into. I handed him the register and the keys, showed him the basic operations. I wanted to warn him, to explain everything, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. No one ever did, until they experienced it themselves. There's a laminated sheet in the drawer, I said finally. Rules from previous attendants. Maybe look at it when you get a chance. He laughed. Company hazing rituals, something like that. I pointed to the scratches on the door. These are important. You'll understand why after tonight. He looked at them with mild interest, clearly thinking we were all crazy. I'd thought the same thing just 12 hours ago. As I left, Margaret was waiting in the parking lot. The real Margaret, alive, exhausted from her own overnight vigil. You did well, she said. 23 marks in one night. That's almost a record. Does it get easier? No, it gets different. You'll see different time periods, different tragedies. The Civil War soldiers are particularly disturbing. The plague victims from the 1918 flu pandemic. The highway has been here in some form for longer than you'd think, and they all use it. Why do you keep coming back? She looked at the rising sun, then at the booth where Kevin was settling in for what he thought would be a quiet day of occasional cars and plenty of study time. Because someone has to. Because if we don't anchor them, don't witness their passage, they stop moving. And when the dead stop moving, they start looking for ways back. The boundary between life and death isn't a wall. It's more like a river. It only flows in one direction as long as someone's watching to make sure it does. I drove home as the morning traffic began to build. Commuters heading into Denver, completely unaware that they were sharing the road with an eternal procession of the dead. Every car I passed could have been alive or dead. There was no way to tell in the daylight. The dead became invisible when the sun was up, but they were still there, still traveling, still trying to reach destinations that no longer existed. That night I returned for my second shift. Kevin had quit after his first night, leaving only a hastily scrawled note. "Can't do this. Sorry." He'd made 3 scratches on the door before fleeing. I took my position in the booth, ready for another 8 hours of witnessing, of anchoring, of resisting the voices that would try to lure me into joining the procession. The military convoy arrived at 11:47 p.m., exactly as it had the night before. The same young soldier paid with the same cold coins from 1969. "Training exercise," he said in his grinding sand voice. "Drive safely," I replied, raising the gate. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time. For just a moment, his dead eyes showed something like gratitude, as if my witnessing, my acknowledgement of his passage, somehow mattered. As if being seen, even in death, was better than driving through darkness alone. The convoy passed through, and I made my 24th scratch on the door. 226 scratches to go until I could leave, till the parasites would lose interest, till I could drive away from Highway 49 and never look back. But I was beginning to understand that I might not make it that far. Not because I'd give in to the voices or throw myself into the barrier like Carol, but because someone had to be here. Someone had to witness, someone had to keep the dead moving and the living safe from the things that fed on grief. Maybe I'd become like Margaret, returning even after my 250 marks, training new attendants, warning them about the rules, keeping the boundary stable. Or maybe I'd become something else, something in between, neither fully alive nor fully dead, forever counting scratches on a door that had witnessed decades of passages. The school bus arrived at 12:30 a.m., right on schedule. The drowned children still singing, still dripping, still pressing their palms against windows, asking for help that would never come. I collected no toll. They'd already paid with their lives, and raised the gate. Another scratch on the door. 225 to go. Outside the booth, at mile marker 47, I could see the shadows gathering, the parasites that fed on grief and confusion, waiting for their next opportunity to lure someone out of the booth. They knew about Emily, knew about my guilt over our last conversation, knew exactly how to use my pain against me. But I also knew something they didn't. Every scratch on the door wasn't just counting passages. It was building strength, building resistance, building the ability to distinguish between the legitimate dead who needed to pass through and the things that wanted to trap us all in eternal loops. The gray sedan arrived at 2:47 a.m., the faceless driver with his exact change from 1987. As I took his coins and raised the gate, I noticed something new. There was a passenger in his car now. Carol, the previous attendant who'd driven into the barrier. She sat in the back seat, looking confused, checking her watch, trying to understand why she was in a stranger's car instead of the booth. She'd become one of them, not by choice but by manipulation. The parasites had used her grief to kill her, then trapped her in the procession, incomplete and circling forever. "I'm sorry," I whispered as they drove through. Another scratch. 224 to go. The night continued, an endless parade of souls seeking passage, and I sat in my booth, counting, witnessing, anchoring the boundary between worlds, not because I wanted to anymore, but because I understood what would happen if I didn't. The dead deserve their journey, even if it never ends. The living deserve their ignorance, even if it's fragile, and someone has to sit between them, counting scratches on a door, holding the line against things that would blur the boundary until no one could tell the difference anymore. I am that someone, for now, till my 250 scratches are complete, or until I join the procession myself, whichever comes first.